Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how to multiply your contact list and the impact that can have on growing your church and growing your ministry. Welcome back, everybody. If you are returning, then you recognize our faces. I'm Logan Lyles. I'm joined by Jay Owen here with Business Builders, where we understand that it is harder than ever to reach people online and through digital communications. It can seem confusing and expensive. We want to help make it clear and effective. So Jay is going to be presenting here in just a bit, talking through some of the results and the tactics that the Church of 1122 and other churches that we've worked with here at Business Builders have used to grow their contact list. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're not able to stay the whole time, you will be sent a copy of the recording of this by tomorrow morning, as well as a copy of Jay's deck. But if you are with us live, I want to encourage you to hang out a little bit. We're going to have some specific offers for folks joining us live, as well as some live Q&A time with Jay here in a bit. Speaking of those offers, the first thing before we get into it today, it's almost Black Friday. We are November 20th today at the time of this recording. And here at Business Builders and our Ministry Builder series, we have partnered with our friends over at Church Bundle to offer a really great value. We've put together a 3-step course to 10x your church's online reach. It's a $97 course, but what's really great about our partnership with Church Bundle is we've teamed up with them as well as others like Church Stamp, True Center, and Ministry Pass to bring you 21 other ministry resources valued at over $7,000 altogether. So you can get all of this for the cost of that one course at 97 bucks. So I'll drop a link to that. You can find it at churchbundle.com/ministry builders if you want to check that out today, or if you're watching the recording. So with that said, Jay, I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself to our new attendees for folks that didn't join us on our last two, and we'll get into growing your contact list.
Thanks, Logan, and hello to everybody. Whether you're returning or new, I'm glad that you're here. If we've not met before, my name is Jay, and I get to wear a lot of different hats. One of them is I am the Executive Director of Communication and Digital Discipleship at the Church of 1122 in Jacksonville, Florida. And for my whole life, I have run a business called Business Builders. I started that when I was 17 and been doing that for over 25 years now. And so what I like to bring to the table and what I hope to help you with today is to leverage a long-standing experience in the private sector that's overlapped with nonprofits and ministries, and multiple years in a very large growing church, and seeing how we've rapidly multiplied our contact list. Just for context, to give you an idea of where we're going on the tactics I'm going to share with you today, when I started at 1122, we had about 1,500 people on a text list, which, look, I get that's a lot for a lot of people, but we were averaging about 8,000 people in person every week. So if we're averaging 8,000 people in person and we've only got 1,500 on our list, take a zero off the end if you want. Let's say you're averaging 850 in person and you've only got 150 on a list, or take another zero off the list. Say you've only got 85 people in person. The average church in America is only 150 people. So let's say you got 85 people in person, but you've only got 15 on a texting list. It's a problem. It's a massive problem because you can't disciple people you don't know, and you can't communicate with people that you don't have their contact information. And so how do we get access to that? How do we do it in a way that also helps with discipleship? So we've grown that email list from 1,500 to today. I'm looking at it on the screen now. I'll even share this with you briefly and kind of show you our actual dashboard we use for this, to 84,372. That's a lot more people than when we started. So imagine that in the context of whatever your numbers look like. And the strategies that I'm going to share with you today will do two things. One, most importantly, they will help you disciple your people. And at the end of the day, if we're in ministry and we're not doing that, what are we even doing? Because the ultimate command that Jesus gave was to go and make disciples. So how do we do that in a digital format? I'm going to give you some strategies that will help. And secondarily, the double-edged sword is by discipling them, giving them resources that are going to help them, you're also collecting their contact information, which allows you to follow up with them. What's the value of that? Well, when you follow up with them, they're more likely to show up on a Sunday, whether that's in person or online. They're more likely to take a next step in their discipleship journey. So let's dig into it. I've got a deck I'm going to walk through, but feel free to interrupt at any point in the chat. You can leave a message over there in the chat. Logan will keep track of it. Occasionally, I'll look at it as well. And at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions for anybody that's here live. And for those of you that are watching this on demand later and you're not watching this live, no problem. We're happy to help you as well. Feel free to reply to whatever email you got that has the details about this webinar, and we'll be happy to set up a time to see how we can help. Because one of the core desires for me behind these webinars is I get a lot of people who are calling, emailing, and going, hey, can I just have 15 minutes or 30 minutes to pick your brain and kind of see how you're doing these things at 1122? And I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're just going to put together a series where we can help hundreds of people, hundreds of churches, maybe even thousands eventually over time, all over the world. And in many cases, for those of you that are watching live, we're doing it for free. So for those of you that have gotten in here ahead of time and are enjoying the webinar, thanks for being here. Leave your questions in the chat. In fact, let us know where you're from. I'd love to see in the chat if you're here live, maybe city, state, or country. If you're from outside of the U.S., put that in the chat here in Zoom and let us know where you're from. And I'm going to jump into the deck here and walk you through some very tactical, specific ideas. All right. So how do we multiply our church's contact list and grow our church? Number one, why does it matter? What's the problem that we're actually trying to solve? When I first started 1122, which was about 3 years ago, I sat in a directional leadership team meeting. And one of the first stats that blew my mind, because I had not worked inside of a church before, was that of people in America who say they go to church, they only actually go to church 1 out of every 6 weeks. Now, the problem for that in the ministry world is many people who are working in ministry vocationally, they're not going to church 1 out of every 6 weeks. They're going to church like 3 to 5 times a week sometimes, depending on what's going on, right? And so we have a curse of knowledge, if you will, and don't necessarily see things rightly. And so I thought to myself, how do we help solve this? How can my teams on the digital side alleviate this? And you know, when I first started, it was one of those things where everybody's like, are we going to have a metaverse church? And are we going to have this? And are we going to have that? And I'm like, no, we don't even have a good Instagram. Now we do. I also am really fortunate, I realize that, to work with a large team. So, for example, our social media manager at 1122 is spectacular. Our growth in that channel is more due to her efforts and abilities than it is my strategy and vision. But at the end of the day, we got to put it all together. And so what I want to do is give you some strategies that will work if you're a really big church like 1122, or they'll work if you're a really small church. So here's some numbers just to give you context. When I started there a little over 3 years ago, we were averaging about 8,000 people in person. Now we're averaging about 20,000 people in person. And I'm 100% convinced, although I can't completely prove it, that a lot of the work that we've done on the digital side, whether it's website, app, social media, or even getting other videos out on YouTube, things like that, are a piece of this puzzle. Because when you stay in front of people, they're more likely to take action. If somebody shows up on a Sunday and then never hears from you again until they happen to show up another Sunday, the likelihood of them actually coming next week is significantly lower. Now, there's many things you can do in person to help solve for that, but I'm not talking about that today, whether it's community building or small groups or all those kind of things. But from a digital side, what can we do? And the first and most important thing is to build our own contact lists. So the power of our own contact list is really important. Now, one of the things I talk about a lot is this idea of controlling your own data. There's a difference between leased data, which is basically your social media followers, and owned property. So leased property is somebody who follows you on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever. And owned property is your website, your contact list. And so what we want to do is go, how do we increase our own contact list? How do we expand beyond regular attendees as well? Because it's not just about people who show up in person, and we definitely want their contact information, but there's a lot of people watching online now. Now, I know some of y'all, maybe like us, did not switch to online until COVID, when all of a sudden we had to. Our church had plans to do it, and we kind of were tinkering with it and had some on-demand stuff, but we weren't even running live services. And everybody had to kind of pivot very quickly to get us in a place to do that. But now when I look at things, it's amazing, because on an average Sunday, we'll have 20,000 in person, but online, we'll have tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands more. And if you count social media engagements, it'll be millions of people that we've reached in some way, even if it's just with a short sermon reel. And so I go, gosh, how do I connect with those people? And we've made a lot of progress going from where we're at now, or going from where we were, which was 1,500 texts to 85,000. But when I look at some of our, social media connections that have 3, 4, 5 million views, one of the things actually our team was talking about this morning was we've got a bunch of people who are now kind of scraping our content. So they'll take one of our reels, download it, copy it, put it on their own channel without credit sometimes. But the beauty of a church is I'm kind of happy about that. Like plagiarism is the greatest of flatteries. And so I'm not trying to make money off of any of it in any way. I'm trying to just spread the good news of Jesus Christ. So if other people are going to download that stuff and put on their channels, great, go for it. Now, I'd love some kind of attribution, which we could put in the videos, which we got some work to do there, of how do we drive people towards the next step. So let's talk about that a little bit more. First, software matters a lot. So where are we collecting this information at? When I first started 1122, we use a tool called Rock RMS. So maybe some of you use it. There's many others out there, Planning Center, Online Church Builder. There's a bunch of different community tools that help run churches. And they kind of try to be a jack of all trades, which is okay, but they're not always the best as it relates to doing some of the marketing activities. So we moved our marketing activities, and I know that word's not a word used a lot in church, but really just mass communication. How do we broadcast net to a big group of people? Let's just put it that way. And we moved that from Rock to HubSpot. HubSpot is a marketing automation tool specifically designed for that. In fact, our agency at Ministry Builders is focused on, we're a partner with HubSpot, which just means our team's very experienced at it, and we've used it with a ton of clients in all kinds of industries all over the world. One of the things I love to dig into is texting in as a service. Now, we have a short code at 1122. That code is 441122. It costs a bit to get those secured sometimes, but if you have it in the budget, it makes it much easier than saying, text to 943-781-9179. Nobody remembers that. But if I were to say text, connect to 441122, it's a lot easier to say. It's a lot easier to remember. So I'd encourage you to look at that as an option, getting a short code. Now, texting, you got to be careful with. You don't want to overdo it, but you do want to build that texting list. I'm going to show you some specific tools that we use that will help with that. And so having an option for people during services to connect if they're new, having an option for them to be able to access content, which we're going to talk about a lot on this call, and then providing incentive that offers exclusive content or resources, really discipleship materials is what we're talking about. And when they text in, guess what? They're also opting in for us to be able to communicate with them. Now, I don't want to abuse that, but I want to have their information so that I can scale. I'm also going to show you some tricks, if you will, so that when somebody texts in, how can we gather a little bit more of their information? And we want to capture that information. So I'll show you, we use a tool called ClearStream, which I'll talk about a little bit later. This is our actual dashboard right now. You can see we have 84,372 subscribers. Over the last month, we've had an additional 2,000 people opt in. 14 people have opted out. Look, people come and go. That's okay. But I want this number to be pretty darn low, which it is. And we've only had 12,000 outgoing texts, which means we have not emailed the whole list in the last month. I give you some context for how delicate we are with emailing or texting the entire list, I should say. And then we've had 4,000 incoming texts. That comes in two different ways here. And I don't want to, let's turn this into like a how to use ClearStream call, but I want to give you some insights of how we do use it so it can be a little bit more tactical for you. We set up these keywords in here. And these keywords are things like this. I'm going to talk specifically about this one in a little bit, Psalms. So somebody could text the word Psalms to 441122. In fact, 11,335 people have done that. And of those 11,335, 7,761 were people that I could not text before. I'm actually getting ahead of myself in the presentation, so I'll come back to this. But one of the things that I want to talk about is gathering their contact information. So when I'm in here, a couple of things stand out. Again, I'm not trying to do a full tutorial, but I hope it will be helpful for you to kind of see tactically how some of this is done. We have aliases that are set up because guess what? Psalms is a really hard word to spell. And I'm dyslexic, so it's incredibly hard to me. I mean, why do we got a word that starts with a P that sounds like it starts with an S? Doesn't make any sense. And so we spell it many different ways because we found that people spelled it many different ways. And what happens here is they get added to a list when they text in automatically. And then this is where it gets cool. We'll send them a welcome message, obviously, welcome to the Psalm of the Day. Here's what it says. If the subscriber's first name is empty, in other words, we don't know their name, or if their last name or their email is empty, wait 1 minute and then say, hey, let us know who you are so we can personalize a connection with you. And then what it does is it actually creates a contact form for them to fill out. So we don't just collect their phone number, we collect their phone number, their email address, and their name. Now, everybody doesn't fill it out, but I want to give them an opportunity to so that I can follow up with them later. And then I mentioned that we use Rock RMS. This tool actually pushes that data back to Rock so that it can be used by the church ministry teams and the connection teams in other ways that they may want to. And so you can see this was actually from a couple of years ago that we ran this campaign. It was one of the first campaigns that I ran, but I can see all the people in here that are using it. And so what I want to be able to do is capture that information over time. I talked about this a minute ago, but I'll say it again. One of the beauties of a good content strategy at a church is it is a dual-edged sword. It's dual-purpose content. It is discipleship focused to create valuable resources that help members grow their faith, and it's information collection so that those of us on the communication teams can reach out to people to actually make a connection, which makes a big deal. I mentioned how important software was. The two primary tools that we use on the marketing side are one called Clearstream, which you can see here, clearstream.io. If you have questions about any of these, feel free to put them in the chat if you're watching live. If you're watching on demand, feel free to just reply back to one of the emails. Happy to answer your questions and see how we can help. The other one that we use is HubSpot. So HubSpot is a marketing automation tool. So I can come over here and I can look at our contact list. And when I first joined, I want to say we had about 16,000 people on this list, and now we have almost 80,000. So you can see 79,640 people on this list. And I can do all kinds of things in here, but one of the main things we use it for is email automation. So inside of email automation, I can send an email. This particular one was sent out to 30,000 people. I'm not sure. This is week 1 of a series email. We're testing a new idea, which is sending out these series focused weekly emails, because what I want to do is drive people back to watch the sermon or to listen to the podcast if they weren't in the service that week. Because like I said, everybody doesn't go to church every week. So what can we do to help continue to disciple those people, help keep it top of mind? And so there's basically 3 primary videos that get uploaded to YouTube for us every week. One is the sermon itself. The second is a podcast that gets released on Monday. The podcast is simply an interview-style conversation that is related to the sermon. So this guy right here, Jonathan Vinke, great dude, super smart. He's one of the pastors at our church. He listens to the sermon, usually Pastor Joby Martin, who's over here, or Pastor Ryan Britt, who's over here. And then he will develop a list of questions, and he just asks those guys questions right after the sermon actually gets recorded. They'll sit down and do this podcast. Then it gets released Monday, and then usually we always have some kind of a story as a part of the sermon as well. This is a crazy story actually about a friend of mine, Steve. He lost like 120 pounds on a health journey, which was awesome. Not so awesome as he found out, I think a month or 2 ago. It was September, so a couple months ago from the time this was being recorded, that he went in for a routine colonoscopy and has stage 3 colon cancer. And so he spent so much of his life the last couple of years getting in incredible shape. The guy's like running marathons and doing Spartan races and all kind of stuff. And now he's got this cancer diagnosis, and yet he's trusting God in the middle of the storm. Incredible story, right? Now, here's the crazy thing about these stories, not to sidetrack too much, but when I first started, we had been doing these stories. We have an incredible media team, incredible film team who puts together these stories. But if you didn't sit in a service on Sunday, you couldn't see these videos because they weren't getting put out on the internet anywhere. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, these are awesome stories. And I won't dig into this too far, but let's just click on it and I'll show you. So it'll jump over to YouTube, and feel free to go explore our YouTube channel at the Church of 1122. You can kind of get a gauge of what we're talking about here. But here's him sharing his story. And now we're putting these out on the internet so that many more people can watch them. This one was just released. It's got 558 views. That's more views than most churches have in person on any given Sunday, even though our sermons will have many, many more than that. And so now we're sharing these videos. We're sharing this email. It's going through HubSpot, and I can track it. And so now I want to see, what this conversion rate's like. We sent it to about 30,000 people. 40% of those open it. Now, Open rates can get a little tricky, not to get too nerdy in this right now, but with a lot of the new tools out there that Apple's releasing, for example, they block a lot of our marketing bots, which I like from a personal privacy perspective. I do not necessarily like from a marketer's perspective because we don't necessarily know the real data. So you can see here, it's kind of guesstimating what the real open rate is, reliable opens, all this kind of stuff. But I don't want to get too nerdy. But the most important thing is I know a lot of people are reading the email. Then I can find out how many people are clicking on it. Well, that's actually a pretty low click-through rate. But keep in mind, most of these people, or many of these people probably were at the service. So they probably saw it in person. Maybe they already have a cadence of watching it online. But even 2% in this case, you're still talking about almost 600 people. That's not nothing, right? People that are engaging, connecting. And even if they don't click on it, here's what happens. The church is staying top of mind. The church is staying visible for them so they can be reminded and they go, gosh, we should have gone this week. Let's go next week, And so that's one of the things that we want to do. I can also analyze all kind of stuff in here. I can look at our overall health of our campaign. So I'm really giving you like a peek behind the curtains here. I can see what our engagement rate is like over time, what our click-through rate is, all these kind of things. Gives me a lot of really good data inside of HubSpot. That's why we love it. I can also look at my health of my emails, my email list, 9 out of 10. That's pretty good. That's what I want it to be. Compares me to industry standards of other people, so I don't have to guess, is this number good or not? Like, is 24% good? I mean, you might be like, I don't know. Well, according to the benchmark for the industry, the benchmark's 21. So if I got 24, based on how they track stats, because every platform tracks them a little different, you got to keep that in mind. In this particular industry, in this particular benchmark, that's actually pretty good. Same thing with click-through rates, normally 10%. Industry 7 hard bounces, which is basically means that you send an email and it just bounces back, or unsubscribes. And benchmark's 0.35, we're at 0.2. So overall, very good, 9 out of 10. Really happy with that. I can manage other things in HubSpot too, like forms and ads and social media. If you have questions about HubSpot or you need some help setting up Clearstream or setting up HubSpot, you can reach out to us here at Ministry Builders. We would love to help you with that, but I just want to kind of give you a peek behind the curtains at some of the things we're actively doing. The other thing that's cool is inside of some of the old tools that we used, when somebody just texted into 441122, if they weren't texting a keyword, we just lost them. And I won't dig into any of these texts too specifically because I don't know how personal they are, but we can see and reply to all these people who are messaging us in. So all of a sudden, a one-to-many platform becomes a one-to-one. Aaron in the chat just said, we've been using MailChimp for our email automation. Would you recommend HubSpot over MailChimp? And if so, why? Great question. We used MailChimp for a while before we switched to HubSpot. There's some pros and cons. I'm a little biased towards HubSpot because it's more comprehensive than MailChimp. I also think MailChimp's interface in general is not as easy to use as HubSpot, and HubSpot's just a bigger platform. So I can manage many other things that MailChimp can't manage, like social or landing pages or pop-ups on my website or all kind of stuff. Now MailChimp's added a lot of that over time. But in general, I just like HubSpot better. So some of it is a personal preference. If there's not something specific in the tool that you feel like you're missing, there's no point in doing something else. That said, most of these tools, including HubSpot, provide a free trial. So there's no harm in going and setting up a free trial either and just kind of seeing, hey, is this going to be something that works for me? So yeah, keep putting those questions in the chat. If there's something I can handle on the fly, like I just did with Aaron, I will do that. If not, and I kind of save it to the end, I'll do that as well. So let's talk about this Psalm series specifically. I hinted at it earlier. I showed it to you directly inside of Clearstream, so you know I'm not making this stuff up. Here's the long story short of what happened with this. When I first started 1122, we would ask people to text in. And if you were here for the last 2 webinars, you heard me tell part of this story, but I'm going to give you the full version now. We asked people to text in if they were ready to take some kind of next step. So maybe they were ready to get baptized or ready to commit their life to Christ or ready to serve on a team or start a disciple group or join a disciple group or whatever it may be. The problem with that strategy is most people aren't ready to actually do anything. That's just the truth of it, right? It's the same thing in the sales world. If any of you run businesses or are part of businesses, most people aren't ready to buy today. Most people need some other kind of activity, some kind of nurturing or engagement. So in ministry land, we wouldn't call it nurturing necessarily. We would call it discipleship because I'm providing resources to people to actually help them move forward in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And so A couple years ago, when I first started, we were doing this series in the book of Psalms, and we did 150 days. That's almost half the year in this book, which was awesome. I love that we do this kind of stuff at our church. And we obviously didn't go through every single chapter because it's not enough weeks to do that. That would take 3 years, actually, if you did one chapter per week. But 150 days, though, is enough time to read one chapter a day. And so what I said was, what if we went to the congregation and we said, look, we know that a lot of people struggle to stay in the Word and to read their Bible every day. And even then, it's like, well, what do I read? And so what we want to do is we want to do it together. And so as a church, we want to read the book of Psalms with you. And every day, we want to send you a text to encourage you. And it'll just include the first verse of the psalm. It also included a link back to our website that included the entire psalm for that day and an audio recording for those people that like to listen, because I'm a bit dyslexic, like I said. So I would rather listen than I would actually read. And so it's very helpful for somebody like me. And here's what happened. We added, you can see right here on the screen, 7,761 new opt-ins, which means people who we did not previously have their phone number and weren't able to connect with. That's crazy sauce. Now, I know I'm cheating a little bit because I've already got a very large embedded audience. And some of you are like, well, Jay, that's easy for you because I don't have 8,000 people going to my church. I certainly don't have 20,000. No problem. Like I said, take zeros off the end. If you've got 80 people going to your church, what if you could add 100 more to a texting list? What kind of impact would that create? Not just from a who's coming to church, but from a relationship perspective, from a discipleship perspective. How are you going to disciple people that you can't communicate with? They slipped in the back door and sat down. Now, one of the advantages that some of you have who do have smaller churches is that you can actually see somebody new walk in the door and know who they are. We've got 14 campuses and thousands of people going all over the place. That's a lot harder to do. And so I have to depend on the ability to provide resources in many cases that people choose to opt in for. And now guess what? Now I can communicate with those people. So this was the first campaign that we did this with. And it worked incredibly well. It worked incredibly well because people will listen to our lead pastor especially. And so he just asked them to do this. He said, hey, will you text the word Psalms to 441122? And then our automated workflows helped handle everything else. So the other thing I'm not doing is trying to manage individually 7,000, 8,000 people. I'm putting them in an automated workflow. And so if I go back to ClearStream and I look at keywords, and I come to Psalms. Let's see if the whole thing's in here. I think it goes to a workflow. I might not have this handy, so I might be jumping the gun and trying to show you this. But what it does is it goes through and it sends automatically a list of texts one every day for 150 days. Here's a little word of caution, however. What I did not do the math on is that unlike email, which most of your email platforms, you're going to pay for the total number of people you have on your list, but you don't pay to send an email out. With text, you do. You pay to send a text out. You do that in ClearStream. You do it in basically any texting platform. Now, it's not very much. It's like, I don't know, a penny or so. But here's the thing. Maybe it's even less than that. If you have 8,000 people on that list and you're sending them a text every day, for 150 days, you just do the math on that. It's like 8,000 times 150 days times 0.01. That's $12,000. So I did not have that planned in the budget because I didn't anticipate that volume of response. Now, that said, nobody was really that upset because it was so successful because the relationship opportunities we could connect with people, it all works out in the end. But it's just something to be aware of and take caution on the texting side is like, I'm not sure I would do a daily texting for that many days again because of the financial risk that's involved. That said, this was incredibly powerful because we went from having 1,500 people or so on our list to over 10,000 like this in less than 30 days, which is totally insane. If I could do that in the business world, it'd be a game changer. Then people were like, well, we should do that again. And I'm like, well, yes, but let's switch it up a little bit. And so instead of trying to get their email or their phone number, let's try and get their email address. And so what we did the second time was a 21-day devotional. And we have gone from 18,000 people on our email list, which is a lot, admittedly, to I mean, I rounded up on this on the document, but I showed you a second ago inside of HubSpot. It's a little over, there we go, 79,640 to be precise, but I just rounded up to 80 because I'm a marketer and that's what we do. Um, and so now, to be fair, we didn't do it with just this one campaign. This one campaign probably added 8 to 10,000 people, and then we just kept doing those kinds of things. The thing that really has surprised me, and you have to pay attention to, especially if you're a larger church, is you think that you've like saturated the market. You think like you did one Psalms campaign, one email devotional campaign, and you've probably collected the 80% of the people that you're going to collect. That turned out that's not been true at all. We continue to collect many new names, new contacts as we launch new campaigns. So we did a 21-day Devo in the fall leading up to an event that we call Saturated at 1122. We had a really easy sign up process. Aaron, interestingly, who asked about MailChimp, we actually used MailChimp for this particular campaign because before I used HubSpot. Um, and there were some deficiencies in MailChimp I wish I had had for HubSpot, which kind of led to that transition. But having an easy way for them to sign up, whether it's a QR code on the screen or a number that they can text to and then click an easy link, but want to collect their email address. We pre-built out these devotionals, but here's the other trick, and this matters a ton. On both the texting and in this email system, I don't want to give everything to them in the email. Why? I want to drive them back to the website. So the other thing that we did that was kind of like a shadow of this result is we quadrupled the web traffic over a reasonable period of time. How did we do that? Well, because every time somebody came to one of those Psalms things and they got a text in the morning, what did they do? They clicked on that link. Well, historically, our web traffic over time, I don't have it pulled up, but I could show it to you. It's wild. Historically, over time, our busiest day is Sunday, like probably any of the rest of you. People either looking for directions if they're new, or they're looking to watch a sermon live or download a devotional or whatever it may be. But then what happened was our weekdays got really busy. So people were coming back to the website during the week. Why does that matter? We'll go back to the original stat that I talked about of the people only come to church 1 out of every 6 weeks. Well, now all of a sudden they're getting a daily text or a daily email. What's that doing? It's keeping them top of mind. What's that doing as well? Ideally, hopefully, it's helping them discover and deepen their relationship with Jesus Christ. And guess what? When that happens, what are they more likely to want to do? To go be amongst God's people and to show up in church. Now, I'm an online guy, like I'm a digital guy. I love building out digital resources and digital opportunities. But at the end of the day, I want people to physically show up at a church. I just believe that there's power in people being physically together. I think we all generally believe that, at least after COVID. It's not the same. It's not the same watching online. Praise God that we have the opportunity to do digital things and even this webinar right now. People watching from all over the world. And I think I saw somebody earlier they're all over the place that y'all are here. Some of y'all I can't even pronounce where you're from. So it's awesome. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that we have this technology. But it would be better if we were sitting around a fire pit. It would be better if we were, hanging around having a meal. It would be. I'm just staring into a teleprompter screen right now with no words on it because I just like to wing it. But it would be better. And so all these things that we're doing have an end result, and the end result is one thing. It is to help people discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. Full stop. Now, as a marketer, I have a responsibility to help gather contact information so that I can reach more people, right? Now, marketer is not a word that we use in the church per se, but it is the same thing. It is the casting of nets to connect with more people. So those are kind of 2 specific examples: the texting campaign and the email campaign. We've done multiple iterations of that for multiple different things that have had varying levels of success, but they've all been successful. And by successful, I mean they've drawn more people into our email list that we didn't have before. It makes a huge difference. One of the things that one of our social team members, Kendall, did, she's amazing, is she set up an automation platform inside of Instagram. It's called MiniChat, minichat.com. If you've not seen it, I think it's minichat.com. And it's an awesome tool that you can set up on things like Instagram. We get a ton of comments on there, which is great, a ton of engagement. But we want to get to know people one-on-one when we provide them more resources. So now a lot of times she'll post an Instagram post, and then it will say, hey, a matter of fact, let's just go look at one right now. Let's see, this will take us right there. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Okay, so this is a post from Sunday. She doesn't do it in that one. Let's look at this one. Yeah, here we go. So here's a clip from a sermon on Sunday. And you'll notice right here it says comment sermon for a link to Pastor Britt's sermon on all on living our lives reflecting our Lord. And so you can comment sermon. So if I comment sermon here, what will happen is I will instantly get a direct message from the church with a link that says, here's Pastor Britt's sermon, and then I can click on it, and guess what? That takes me over to YouTube, which increases my YouTube traffic. And when more people watch your sermon on YouTube, guess what? Then, all of a sudden, more people see it because you've watched it or because more people have watched it. So YouTube's like a snowball. The more people that watch a thing, the more it recommends the thing to other people inside of YouTube. And so there's a huge growth factor there. I'll show you a couple of things while I'm in here. You'll notice that our YouTube channel now has grown to about 82,000. I forget where it was at when I started, but let's just go look at it. I'm going to show you because a lot of people like to see, I like to see behind the scenes of what's going on, what people are getting into. So let's take a look at these analytics here, for example. And let's look at lifetime. And it's still loading, but can you notice how it was pretty flat for a while? And then have you noticed the last couple of years, it just went bloop, 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 bloop. Why is that? Because we've been intentional about our engagement and connection to get people into those next steps. And look, it's not all about me by any stretch of the imagination. I've got an incredible team at the church who does a ton of heavy lifting to get this stuff done. But as you look at, for example, over the last 365 days, so over the last year, we've added 58,000 subscribers. Now, keep in mind, we have 82,000. So the vast majority of our subscribers were acquired in the last 12 months. I could probably do a whole nother webinar on YouTube, which I'm not doing today, but I want to highlight it because YouTube and the website are almost like lag measures to the texting and the email. Okay. So the texting and the email, I'm collecting their information and I'm sending them to a thing. I'm sending them out back to these channels. And now look, our views are up 4 million in the last 365 days. That's not nothing. In fact, that's a 253% increase over the prior year. And if I were to do the same thing, let's see if I can do last year. Yeah. So last year, we were up 120% over the prior year. And you can see some of these videos really blew up, and some of them are a little bit lower. But from a strategy perspective, driving people back to the content on YouTube helps other people watch the videos. So for example, we used to have all of our videos on Vimeo instead of YouTube. And the reason that I moved everything to YouTube was I knew what would happen is because people will go watch a long sermon, it will then recommend to other people. Then we upload our stories, then we upload worship sets. And now the next phase of what we're working on is segmenting our YouTube. So there'll be a separate channel for Pastor Joby. We already have a separate Spanish one, which I showed off last week during our AI talk. If you missed that AI webinar, you want to get that. You can get it as part of that bundle by going to churchbundle.com/ministry builders. It's in there. And it just makes a huge impact. So here's kind of the funnel that we talked through a little bit. We got to attract people in some way. And it's not by telling them to do something, it's by giving them something. Giving them the Psalms, giving them a devotional, giving them a resource, which many we can gain by just repurposing content we already have. So if you missed last week's AI talk, we talked about that a lot too. It's not necessarily about having to spend all this time to create new stuff because you're like, how am I going to build out all this new content? It's just me on the content team, or even if it's just you as the lead pastor. No problem. The beauty of AI is it allows you to take your existing content and multiply it at a really significant rate. And then it's going to allow you to engage with people because once you attract them, you can know who they are, you can connect with them, and then you can help disciple them. It's a game changer. Here's some key metrics that you want to pay attention to over time. Your list growth rate. I showed you Clearstream for texting. I showed you HubSpot for email. I showed you YouTube. And then I probably would add Google Analytics to that today, but I won't get into it for now because it's not about websites. But I want to track, am I growing? And some people are like, it's you big churches, all you care about is the numbers. And I'm like, yeah, because numbers are people. And I care about people. And so I want to know, am I reaching more people? And if I'm not, especially if that's my job, what am I even doing? And look, I'm not trying to get on the soapbox about it because I do believe in deep individual one-on-one personal relationships and connections for sure. In fact, one of the most powerful things that our social media manager did a while back was when somebody messages our, or actually when they follow one of our YouTube channels or Instagram channels, we immediately reply to them and ask how we can be praying for them. So now all of a sudden, a one-to-many platform becomes a one-to-one, becomes a discipleship relationship, becomes a care opportunity. It's incredible. You want to pay attention to your engagement rates. Are those going up or down? Are people actually opening the things that you're sending? If not, why? In an email, often it's your subject line. It could also be a technical setup. People, it's not even reaching them in the first place. So some of that really matters. Are they replying? What's the engagement look like? Are they converting? So by converting, I mean if I give them an offer, like download Psalms, are they downloading it or not? Here's a little trick. One of the things you noticed earlier when I suggested the idea of people downloading the Psalms is I led with a problem. I led with, hey, many people struggle to open their Bible. I don't know about you, but I know I've had plenty of seasons of struggling with that too. Well, when I do that, I connect with people and I root into their head that they know they have a problem. And I want to help them solve it. And so the solution is we're going to provide this texting campaign so you can't forget. And we're going to do it all together so we're in community. It solves another problem because people often feel lonely. And so it's not just about, hey, do this thing, because if you do it, you'll be a better Christian. It's not that at all. It's here's a problem many of us experienced. Here's a solution that we're going to provide, and here's an outcome that's going to create. Because I guarantee you, if you spend 150 days in the book of Psalms, you're going to be in a better mental state. You want to talk about a good way to help with all kinds of mental struggles? Just read the book of Psalms every day. It's powerful. It's powerful for many ways because, I mean, y'all that know the Bible know well, like Psalms is often a lament. It's David or the author of the particular chapter crying out to God. And there's some empathy in that to go, oh, it's not just me, you know. So we want to check our conversion rates. Are people paying attention? A lot of times that's about how we position the offer. Are we defining the problem and then providing a solution that they want to download? If they don't download it, it's not been compelling enough. We've not made it convincing that they should do that because they're making an exchange. They're paying for the content that you create, not with money, but with their email address or their phone number. And so that's a payment of a sort. And so it has to be valuable enough for them to know I might get some more messages in here than I planned on. And then retention rate, are people staying? One of the things you saw that we looked at over here, if I look at my dashboard in ClearStream, last month I've had 14 people opt out. Well, if my list is 100, that's a lot, but my list is 84,000, so it's not. Now I'd like to know who those people are. We could dig into it, find out why maybe. They could just have multiple phone numbers on the list, or maybe they've gone to a different church and they don't want our content anymore, no problem. But there's opportunity there. Same thing on my email list. I want to go over and I want to look at my email from a retention perspective. And I want to look at, whenever it loads. Let's just pick, here we go. We got a Christmas concert coming up. And Logan just mentioned, drop any questions you have in the chat. I'm going to get to those here in just a couple of minutes. So I want to look at how many people are unsubscribing. So 69 people have unsubscribed, which again, if I had 100 people on my email list, that's a lot of people unsubscribing. I got a real problem. But I have 51,000 that received this particular email. So that's 0.14%. Now I can click on that and I can see who those people are. And if I really wanted to dig in, I could have a discipleship minister or somebody else kind of go through that list and go, hey, there's somebody on here that we should check on and just see what's going on, because we do want to maintain really good relationships with people. All right, so next steps before we get to questions. Assess your current state. Don't try and do everything all the time. Set clear goals. What's a thing that you could do? Maybe it's just a post to Instagram or create a single offer that somebody could download related to your next sermon series. So maybe you got a sermon series coming up. What could you take your sermon notes, use the AI tools that we talked about last week, create an additional content offer that people could download and access. If you missed last week, one of the things that one of the ideas that I mentioned was I was at a men's conference with our lead pastor, and I wanted to create a content offer for him, and so we literally created this text, men to 441122, and I built this entire content offer, which is download some sermon notes and basically a recap of the things he said at this men's conference. And used AI to build all of this. It's very doable, very within reach. I talked about exactly how to do all these things in our last webinar, so you can grab the links to those in the chat. if you want them. Choose the right tools. I mentioned today ClearStream and HubSpot. I love those two tools. If you want more details about those or a good link to get set up, be happy to help. Also, our team at Ministry Builders does help with HubSpot onboarding to make sure that you're getting that done right. We'll help craft a blueprint so you have a clear plan so you're not wasting a bunch of time and money on things that don't work. And then launch it. Try some things. See what works. A lot of times where people get stuck is they're not curious enough. They're not willing to just try a thing and see if it works. It's okay if it fails. Like, at least you made some progress. Even if you only have one new person sign up for your email list or your text list, that's one person you didn't have before. And I don't know about you, but Jesus left the 99 to go find the one. So I hope that has been helpful to kind of see a behind the scenes curtain. We got about 15 minutes left. If we've had, I haven't seen any other specific questions, but if you have specific questions, you can put those in the chat now. Maybe Logan, maybe you have some that have come through, and I'm happy to help where I can.
Yeah, I can chime in. I'll just point out in the chat, as Jay was mentioning, if you're looking for, more help on any of this stuff, whether it's AI, whether it's implementing the right texting or email automation platforms, check out ministryblueprint.com and you can schedule a call with our team there. Because oftentimes we do these sorts of trainings and there's three things that people do. Do nothing, which we hope you don't do. You do it yourself, which we're very happy that you can take some of these strategies, tactics, and tool recommendations and do it yourself. Or third, you need some help with either all of it or some of it. So if that third option, either the all or some, makes sense for you, check out ministryblueprint.com. Jay, I wanted to come back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago about creating your first sort of content offers, especially if you are talking about evangelism and outreach, and maybe you're putting some stuff out there on different social channels, and you're trying to draw people in from that rented land out on social media onto your own owned property, into your text and email list. Let's say, you've got a church that has a lot of young families. I was speaking with a church out in California just this week that said, hey, we got a lot of folks with young families, young parents of young growing families. We've also got a lot of men who are dealing with mental health issues, dealing with addiction, different things like that. Where would you start in kind of thinking about maybe some of those demographics, how you would start to put together some sort of content offer to attract those folks from outside the church, get them at least onto your digital property so that you can start to engage them?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great way to think about it. Because what you've asked, Logan, is to think about the idea of who are we trying to communicate to? Who are the people that we're trying to communicate to? And the more specific we can be with that, the more likely we are to actually draw them in. And so what I would do is I would think about this in two different ways. My first priority, which was my first priority at 1122, was do I even know all the people that are already here? I already know the people who, over the last 6 to 8 weeks, at some point, they've come to 1122. Do I know those people? I knew the answer to that was no, because I only had 1,500 people on my text list, and I had 15,000 showing up at Easter, and on a regular Sunday, I'd have 8,000 showing up. So I'm like, I know I'm missing 10 times, literally, who the audience is. And so my first audience that I want to go after, as far as knowing who they are, is my current audience. The easiest way to do that is create content around your current sermon series. So something else that they can get access to, that they have to either send a text in or sign up with their email list. It could be questions to ask let's say you're doing a series on family, right? And one of the things that's tough in families is to know, how do I translate what came in Sunday morning from a lead pastor to my kids around the table. Okay. So if I was a church, one of the tools we actually did create, this was a physical asset, but you could create a digital version as well, is a list of questions. So we created these little cards, like playing cards. And my kids actually love these. And when you're sitting around the dinner table, you just pull a random card out of the deck, and it's just a question. It's a question to ask the table. And usually they're age appropriate. But you could easily do this in a digital format. You can do something cool where it flips through different slides on a screen. Some of the AI tools I showed last week would allow you to do this without much cost or money. Or you could just print up a PDF with 20 questions to ask around the dinner table related to the sermon. And now you're doing a couple of things. One, you're encouraging people to get around the dinner table. Well, we know for a fact that families, the data is very clear. The children who have the greatest advantage in the world are people who have a mother and a father. And one of the greatest indicators of family success over time is how many times per week they sit at the dinner table together when they're younger. That's what the data says. And so it goes, well, how do we help encourage that behavior? Now, look, I know many of y'all and many people that you serve are in very different life situations that they can't necessarily control. Single moms, single dads, all those kind of things. No problem. We want to think about them. We want to create resources for them too. But if I'm doing a family series, I'm thinking, hey, let me create a list of questions that they can get access to. And I was like, hey, just text questions to 441122. We want to send you a resource. Next time you're sitting around the dinner table with your kids, which hopefully is tonight, you can just ask these questions and create curiosity at your family table. Guess who's going to sign up for that? Any family who wants to disciple their children. Guess what? Any family who's coming to your church and sitting there for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is and checking their kids in the kids industry, they're there because of that reason. And I mean, I know for me, like we started coming back to church. We had young kids when we were young. I have 5 kids now, but my oldest, I grew up in the church, but then like a lot of kids going through college, I just said kind of didn't find a place, wasn't locked in anywhere. Even when I got married, we got married at 21. We didn't end up in church very often. Once we had Hayden, our oldest, we wanted to be back in church. Why? Because I knew that it mattered for him to be there, right? So if I can create resources around that for that target demographic, now we're cooking. In fact, we did this. We did this for a series called As for Me and My House. But here's the interesting thing that we did. We created an email devotional series for families, but we actually created 3 different Devo types. And if I can remember all the types, one was for people with kids, one was for single parents, and I think one was for people without kids, some version of that. What was cool about that was I would see people who would sign up for like the kids one and also sign up for the single parent one. People who would sign up for, it was a married one. It was a married Devo. It was a kids, like married with kids Devo, and then a single parent Devo. And so we created these different avenues and avatars, and people signed up for these. Well, then what happens is I start to segment people into different groups so I can start to go, how can I communicate better? How can I provide resources for these people based on where they're at in their life? That's a long answer to your question, but
Yeah.
that's how I would think about it if I was going after it, and that's how we have thought about it.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I like what you said earlier as we were talking in starting with the problem. What is the problem in their mind right now? Is it loneliness? Is it overwhelm as a parent? Start there and use that in your communication in not only what content resource offer do you create, but how you communicate and how you lead with that. As they used to say when I was in journalism school, don't bury the lead, right?
That's right.
You don't just kind of speak in chronological order. You lead with the most important, the most pertinent, and that is the problem that they're feeling and the pain that they're dealing with. The other question I got from a church I was consulting with earlier this week, Jay, was, they were talking about, hey, we have an English speaking congregation, we have a Spanish speaking congregation, we have folks who are baby boomers, we have Gen Z and millennials, and across all of those different ways to kind of slice and dice the demographics of their community, there are going to be very different preferences in the channels that they prefer, which communication methods they prefer, email versus text. My first recommendation was along the lines of what you were talking about here. As you start to create this regular cadence of communicating with folks via email and via text, look at the engagement rates, look at the open rates, those sorts of things, and let the data kind of adjust your strategy as you go. What other advice would you give for folks with trying to think about how to serve people at different stages there as far as their communication preferences?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is just to ask them. When they go to sign up for a thing, you might have multiple ways they could sign up for it and let them kind of self-select. Um, let's say we're going to do a Devo series where somebody had the option to sign up for text or email or just go view it on the website. You can literally just give them that option when they go sign up for it. Some people might say both. So it's like, I want it via email, I want it via text, I want both. Now in their profile, I can kind of save that and go from now on when I communicate to this person, I want to primarily communicate to them via text or via email. It's the same thing for people who may have side businesses and you're working in business land. Because I know a lot of people in ministry run side businesses too, because you got to figure it out financially. And in business, it's the same thing. Like we want to communicate with clients in the way that they want to be communicated with, not the way that we want to communicate.
Oh, now that I can pull myself off mute, I was just looking in the chat and I love what Jose just did. He used otter.ai, which is a call recording, transcribing, and AI note taking tool. I'm a big fan of Otter. We also use Fathom here at Business Builders. Fathom.video is a great tool for analyzing recorded calls on things like this on Zoom or on a webinar. And it looks like Otter generated, hey, what Jose has learned so far, and gave a nice bullet pointed list. This is a great example of some of the things that we talked about last week in how you can take a sermon or a long form conversation like this and use AI to tailor that for other sorts of situations and other formats. All
Yeah,
right.
so
Well,
there was one
go
other
ahead, Jay.
question there's one other question that I saw in the Q&A box from Sean that I thought I would address really quickly.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
Sean, you had asked potentially transition into a discipleship role, and one of the job requirements involves some of this partnering with comms director. I was leaning towards pastor line. I've not actually used pastor line, but here's a little hack. I'm switching back to my AI gears now, but that's okay. I went into ChatGPT just now, and I said compare pastor line and clearstream.io as a texting service for a church. This is a fun little trick in a table. And then it will actually put it in a table and compare them together. So at a glance, it seems like Pastor Line, at least their starting price is a little bit cheaper. They both have a free trial, two-way communication, automated workflows, integrate with popular church apps, live polls. They got a lot of the same features. User reviews 4.3 out of 5 on GetApp, 4.8 out of 5. So this one gets a little bit better reviews, also from more people, so it's probably more popular. Um, and then I'll tell you what I would do if it was me. I would just be like this because I've not used this tool before. But I do love a good tool. Is I'd go in here and be like, okay, what do we got? What do we got going here? And I might even sign up for a free trial and give it a whirl. Um, I've not used this particular one, so it's hard for me to tell you whether it's better than Clearstream or not. I can just tell you that I've used a lot of tools, and Clearstream's really good. It would be
Mhm.
hard to beat Clearstream from a just usability function. Even looking at this website, it's not that they do a bad job. I can just tell you Clearstream's interface design's better, like right off the bat. And if the interface design's better, it's easier to use. So, but I would try them both. And
Yep.
then, what other questions I got on here? You asked one more, and then I guess I'm
Yep.
almost out of time. Another question would be when it comes to discipleship. Sean asked, is there any way to document where people are in their journey so they can celebrate things like milestones and provide that person the right support they need for their spiritual maturity stage they're in? Yeah, I'm actually working on this right now. Um, there's a, you could build this out in HubSpot. You could build like roles of where people are at in their journey, but we're not doing it that way. There's a company, let me see if I can find it real quick, and I'm probably not going to remember it, but I'm going to try. Oh, I did remember it. Look at that. Now, I've not used this particular tool, but I'm thinking about using it. So we're really getting nitty gritty here, but that's fine. This is what I would do on an individual call. So welcome to that. They do exactly what you're talking about, which is they have this software functionality that I think is really cool. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. They'll integrate with a lot of different software platforms and see these like little bubbles right here. These are like almost kind of gamifying the next step. So it's like this is the baptism, this is regular attendance, this is probably tithing. You see all these different like categories where they gamify and then they can personalize the communication based on their particular journey. So I've not used this yet, to be fair, but I'm highly considering it because it integrates with all the other tools that we use already. It just kind of bolts on top to create segmentation. So segmentation, for those of you who aren't familiar, is basically what Sean's asking, which is how do I, from a discipleship perspective, how do I put people in a particular journey and understand what their next step is without them having to even self-identify all these things? We do a little bit of that in Rock RMS right now. It's just a little clunky. And then last question I see here in the Q&A form from Tim, he asked, do you use group chats or forms for discipleship? If so, what software? Yes, a lot of folks use GroupMe for this, which is an app you can download. I think there's a free version. I don't love it. I'd love to find a different tool. Internally, we use a tool called Slack, and we also use that for some of our serve staff or what you call volunteers. Um, but GroupMe is what a lot of our discipleship folks use just to create individual group chat conversations. I think there's probably a better way. I might even develop something at some point because I'm big into building new apps right now. Um, So I'm thinking deeply about it, but that's the best solution I have right now.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think I got
Uh,
all the questions, so
yeah,
right on
I
time
think you
too.
did. Tim, Sean, and everybody else who engaged in the chat throughout. Thank you guys so much for your questions. Glad that this was helpful. Aaron, thank you for the feedback. Glad you were able to get value out of all three of these. We may be doing some more, so watch out for emails from us here at Business Builders for more in this Ministry Builder series. We might do something specific on YouTube, something like that. I'll drop my email address in the chat. Most of the emails about this series should be coming from me directly, but in case you're having any trouble getting emails, or you want to just send me a note and say, hey, I would love for you guys to dig into this, or yeah, YouTube sounds like a great other topic, or hey, what about this? What about social media ads, or using Google grants that you can use to advertise your church on Google with local SEO? Any of those topics that sound interesting or ones that you'd like to offer up, shoot me an email. We would love to help you out. And again, ministryblueprint.com is a great way to engage with our team as well. All right, Jay, thanks for giving us a peek behind the curtain at the numbers at 1122, the great results you guys have driven there, and sharing with more churches and ministries so that they can do the same. Appreciate you, sir. And
Thanks,
everybody,
Logan.
have a great rest of your week. We'll see you.
Bye, y'all.